Hello, my name is Eddie Jennings and I want to welcome you back to the channel. In this video I'm going to talk about the built-in firewall for your server, either a Linux server or Windows server, and whether or not you should enable it. And if you want the short answer, it is yes. It needs to be enabled, should be enabled at all times. You should configure it as needed to allow your services and applications to work as they should work. But you will probably find you will go into an environment that has the built-in firewall for your servers disabled for some reason, either disabled via a technical policy such as group policy has disabled a particular firewall domain or firewall profile if you're working on a Windows server, or there may be a policy where, well, when we deploy new server VMs, we automatically disable the firewall as part of that server deployment. And in my opinion, that is a mistake to do. That server firewall should not be disabled really for any production reason. Now, there will probably be times where you have to troubleshoot a server or an application. You will temporarily disable it for that purpose. That's fine. That's not the scope of what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are folks that just disable it all the time and never have it on, and that's a problem in my opinion. For one reason for that is good security is done in layers, and if you think about it, let's say that you have for the edge of your network between your internal network and the internet, you have a really good quality firewall router, and it's doing its job. It is keeping bad traffic out, allowing good traffic in, and keeping tabs on the traffic that is originating from your network going to the outside world. It's doing its job. It's doing a great job. However, there's a threat that happens on that originates from inside your network. A person has a USB thumb drive. They plug it in, run a program. Now, there are probably ways to disable users from being able to do that, but I would think if you're of the mindset of we're not going to have firewalls enabled on our servers, you're probably not going to think through about threats on your internal network. So this USB comes in, the little program is run, it starts going through your network causing problems. Well, that great firewall you have on the edge of your network isn't going to do anything about that, nor should it. That's not its job. So if you rely on just that single layer for security, then you're leaving yourself vulnerable to pretty much any attack that doesn't originate from the internet, or if there's networks between you and the internet from the outside world. Having the firewall on your server helps with mitigating attacks, because in addition to you having that layer on the edge of your network not allowing traffic in, you then have that layer on your server saying, all right, for these servers only particular traffic should be coming in, such as, let's say you're running a web server and you're running Apache on Fedora or CentOS. Well, that firewall should probably be allowing the following traffic in. It should allow connections on port 80 or 443 if you're not using 80 at all, and probably allow connections in on port 22 for SSH for management. That's it. It shouldn't be just blanket allowing any other traffic to come in. It is unwise to assume that just because traffic originates from your internal network that it can be 100% trusted. That's just not how it works. The another reason to keep this firewall enabled, server operating systems and the services in them have default configurations for a reason. Now, the default is not always applicable 100% of the time, but if you're having to make the decision of, well, do I go with the default or do I go with this custom thing, and you have no reason to do this custom thing, use the default. And I know for a fact Windows operating systems and for Linux distros, and I'm the most experienced with CentOS and Fedora. I assume the Debian world and Ubuntu and such that does the same. That firewall is on by default, and if you need to punch holes in it for your application, do it. For example, that web server that you're running, you're going to need to allow traffic on port 80 or port 4 or TCP 80, TCP 443. But other than that, it needs to stay on. It's just part of good configuration of your server. One of the, and kind of this has been alluded to, but one of the reasons sometimes I hear that we just keep the firewall off is to allow applications to work. Well, I mean, that having the firewall in place can be a problem. I don't necessarily see it as a problem as much as you have a misconfiguration somewhere. Like during the process of installing your application, the step of configure the server to allow the traffic that application needs wasn't done. So it's not necessarily a problem as in the firewall broke the application. It's more of a we didn't have the server configured right for the application. Now, if you have an application and the vendor's like, all right, firewall just has to be off, then I would question whether or not that is a business-worthy application to use if it requires no firewall to be on. Usually the answer to that is, yeah, we'll keep the firewall on, but tell us what ports traffic needs to be able to travel on, and we configure the firewall as needed. Another thing, and this sometimes you don't have a choice in the perfect world, I would not allow the application installers and such, I would not allow those programs to configure your firewall. And on the Windows side of this, I mean, is this application configuring the firewall to say this particular executable can do whatever it wants, or is it configuring it for specific ports? You lose a layer of control when the application is configuring the firewall. Sometimes there's no way around that, but I would say if possible, application installer does its job of install the application. Then it's your job as the system administrator to make sure the system itself is configured properly for the application, which part of that configuration is configuring the firewall. So if you're faced with the choice of do you blanket enable, blanket disable the server OS firewall, and this applies both to Linux and Windows, the answer is enable it. Unless there's a good reason to not do that, it should be enabled. And then if reasons start coming in that says no, we should disable it, then the question is, okay, why? And if the answer is, well, because the application doesn't work, then you need to start asking, okay, what is the application trying to do? What kind of traffic does it need? For example, I go back to that web server. I mean, a web server, you're going to need to have port 80 or port 443 open on your firewall, because that's those are the ports that HTTP and HTTPS use for communication. So avoid just having it off, even if it might seem kind of like the easy way to go. Have it on, take the time to configure it right. If you have multiple servers, there are softwares available that would allow you to manage the firewall on Windows servers, manage the firewall on Linux, can make that a little bit easier for you. But ultimately, it needs to stay on the servers and it needs to be configured properly. So I welcome comments and such. If you're a person that is dead set on never having that firewall turned on, I would love to hear from you and hear why. I mean, I'm not the be-all end-all of IT knowledge. Perhaps there's a truly good reason to have it off, again, outside of troubleshooting. And if there is, I'd love to learn it. But I kind of doubt that's the case. Or if you're a person that's firewall on all the time, perhaps you can think of some reasons that I haven't mentioned that why you should keep it on all the time. So regardless, I welcome feedback. The goal is for everyone participating, myself as the content creator and you as the audience member, to learn. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the thumb up to like it, and also subscribe to the channel so you can be aware of future content as it comes out. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.